The black void of space glittered with distant stars, each a potential cradle of life or desolation. Admiral Velker sat in the command chair of the voracious Dawn, the flagship of the Kellan Dominion's invasion fleet. His scaled claws tapped the armrest in a steady rhythm as he stared at the tactical display. The planet below was a shimmering jewel of blues and greens, Earth. A world that, in the grand scope of the universe, should have been insignificant. And yet here they were. "This is beneath us," Velker muttered, his voice a deep, guttural growl. Beside him, Subcommander Drith inclined her head, her sleek reptilian frame reflecting the dim bridge lights. "Primitive species," Drith said with a sneer. "Barely out of their cradle. This will be over before the cycle ends." Velker nodded but remained uneasy. He wasn't a fool. He knew the Galactic Council's restrictions on interference with developing worlds were clear. But humanity's sudden expansion into their system and the destruction of a Kellan scouting vessel had provided the perfect pretext. The Council wouldn't intervene now. They never did when justice could be claimed. "Send the ultimatum," Velker ordered, leaning forward. "I want to see their faces when they realize what they've done." A junior officer worked the communication console, and moments later the main screen blinked to life. The human delegation appeared, an assembly of what Velker assumed were their leaders. They looked soft, their flesh unarmored, their eyes small and unimpressive. Yet there was something in their expressions, a strange mix of resolve and disdain that made Velker narrow his gaze. "This is Admiral Velker of the Kellan Dominion," he began, his voice reverberating across the bridge. "You stand accused of violating sovereign space and attacking our vessel. In accordance with galactic law, you are given one opportunity to surrender unconditionally. Refuse and you will be annihilated." The human at the center of the delegation, a man with graying hair and a calm demeanor, leaned forward. "I'm General Isaac Reed," he said evenly, "and I'd like to correct a few things. First, your ship violated our territory. Second, we didn't attack, we defended ourselves. And third," Reed's eyes sharpened, "we don't surrender." Velker's claws dug into the armrest, the sound of tearing metal punctuating the tension. This insolence was unexpected. "You misunderstand your position," Velker hissed. "We could destroy your entire planet before your primitive weapons even reached our shields." Reed's lips twitched into a humorless smile. "You could try." The screen went dark as the transmission ended, leaving an oppressive silence on the bridge. Velker turned to Drith, his yellow eyes blazing. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded. "Humans wish to learn their place. Let us teach them." Humanity's response was swift, though not in the way Velker had expected. His fleet's first probes into Earth's orbit were met with organized resistance, far more coordinated than any primitive species should have managed. Small, agile ships harried the Kellan fleet, striking vulnerable supply lines and retreating before a counterattack could be mounted. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, yet they fought like cornered beasts, adapting faster than seemed possible. On the bridge of the voracious Dawn, Velker's frustration grew with each passing hour. "Another convoy destroyed," Drith reported, her voice tight with frustration. "Their smaller ships evade our targeting systems and their stealth technology is unexpectedly effective." Velker slammed his fist onto the console, denting the metal. "How are they doing this? Their technology is centuries behind ours." Drith hesitated, her scales darkening in embarrassment. "They are resourceful, Admiral. Their ability to repurpose and innovate is unique." Velker growled, baring his sharp teeth. "Enough excuses. Deploy the surface units. If their fleets are this irritating, I'll take pleasure in crushing them on the ground." The Kellan ground forces descended like a tidal wave of steel and fire. Cities crumbled under the weight of orbital bombardments, and towering Kellan war machines marched across Earth's surface, obliterating anything in their path. The first engagements were overwhelmingly in the Dominion's favor. Human resistance was scattered, their forces ill-equipped to stand against Kellan plasma weaponry and advanced combat armor. But victory was short-lived. In the ruins of Chicago, a Kellan battalion found themselves ambushed by a ragtag group of human soldiers and civilians armed with scavenged Kellan weapons. The humans used the city's labyrinth of collapsed buildings and underground tunnels to their advantage, striking from the shadows and disappearing before the Kellans could respond. What should have been an easy occupation turned into a nightmare of guerrilla warfare. Velker watched the reports with growing unease. "How are they still resisting?" he demanded, pacing the bridge. "We've destroyed their infrastructure, their command centers. What's left to fight for?" Drith looked up from her console, her expression grim. "Everything, Admiral. For them this is survival." The final straw came when the Kellans captured a human prisoner, an unassuming engineer named Mia Carter. Velker personally interrogated her, hoping to uncover the source of humanity's unyielding resistance. What he received instead was a lesson in why his people had underestimated humans. "You think you're invincible," Mia said, her voice steady despite her restraints. "You think because you're stronger and more advanced you've already won. But you don't understand what it means to be human." Velker sneered. "Enlighten me." Mia leaned forward, her eyes blazing with defiance. "We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. Empires have risen and fallen, and yet we're still here. Do you know why? Because we adapt. Because when we're pushed to the brink, we don't break, we innovate. You can destroy our cities, but you'll never destroy our will to survive. And here's the thing," she smirked. "We learn from our enemies. Every move you make, every weapon you deploy, we're watching. And we'll use it against you." Velker stared at her, momentarily at a loss for words. Her audacity was maddening, yet there was something in her tone that sent a chill down his spine. "We'll see about that," he growled, rising to his full height. "Your defiance will end along with your species." But as Mia was dragged away, her final words echoed in his mind like a haunting prophecy. "You picked the wrong species to mess with." Admiral Velker was restless. The pristine order of the Kellan invasion had begun to fray like a thread pulled too far. Reports of unexpected resistance and mounting losses piled up on his desk, and each one chipped away at the image of an easy conquest he had promised the Dominion. But Velker wasn't worried, not yet. No species as primitive as humans could pose a true threat to the might of the Kellan Dominion. Still, that woman's words, Mia Carter, lingered in his thoughts. "We adapt. We innovate. We learn." He scoffed at the memory. The Kellans were an apex species. Adaptation and innovation were their hallmarks. No soft-skinned primates could surpass them. And yet, deep down, the spark of unease remained. "Admiral," Drith interrupted his thoughts. Her claws danced over her console as she read from the latest report. "Our forward base in their eastern continent has been destroyed." Velker froze, his yellow eyes narrowing dangerously. "Destroyed? Oh. We had full defensive fortifications, artillery, shields, air support." Drith's head dipped slightly, a gesture of both respect and unease. "The humans infiltrated using drones. Hundreds of them. They were small, virtually undetectable. They targeted our shield generators first, then used explosives to disable critical infrastructure. By the time our forces responded, the humans had already evacuated." "Drones?" Velker repeated, venom in his voice. "You're telling me we were outmaneuvered by toys?" "They are not toys, Admiral," Drith said carefully. "Their drones are not as advanced as ours, but they're modular and can be mass-produced with astonishing speed. They also—" She hesitated. "Speak," Velker demanded. "They appear to have incorporated Kellan technology into their designs." "Salvaged from the battlefield?" Velker's claws clenched, a sharp crack resounding through the bridge as he snapped the armrest of his chair. "They dare turn our own weapons against us?" Drith nodded solemnly. "It's worse than that. They seem to understand how to exploit our technology's weaknesses. Every countermeasure we deploy they adapt to within days. Their hit-and-run tactics are becoming more effective, and their ability to strike where we least expect them is troubling." Velker rose from his seat, towering over the bridge crew. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of his fury. "Then we will escalate. No more mercy. No more concessions. Deploy the annihilation protocols. If they wish to test the might of the Dominion, we will burn their entire planet to ash." As the Dominion escalated, humanity's ingenuity only grew sharper. The Kellans unleashed waves of orbital bombardments, targeting key cities and population centers. Yet for every city reduced to rubble, there were survivors, and those survivors carried with them a fury that Velker and his kind could never understand. In the shattered remains of New York, Captain Liara Chen of the Earth Defense Forces stood with her makeshift battalion, a mix of soldiers, engineers, and even farmers. Her helmet was scorched, her armor cobbled together from EDF and salvaged Kellan plating, but her eyes burned with determination. "The Kellans think they've crushed us," Liara said, addressing her troops. "They don't realize we've been waiting for this moment." She gestured toward the horizon, where a convoy of trucks rumbled into view, covered in camo netting and carrying salvaged Kellan weaponry. One of her lieutenants, a wiry man named Marcus, raised an eyebrow. "So, what exactly are we looking at here?" "Meet the Mavericks," Liara said with a grin. "Kellan plasma weapons retrofitted onto human vehicles. We can't match their tech, so we're leveling the playing field our way." The troops cheered as the vehicles pulled up, but Marcus still looked skeptical. That's great and all, but these aren't going to win us the war. Liera's grin widened. No, but they'll buy us time. The brains at HQ are cooking up something big, something that'll turn the tide for good. Until then, we hit them where it hurts. Over the following weeks, the Kellans found themselves caught in an escalating web of chaos. Their once impenetrable lines of supply were severed by human ingenuity. Maverick squads roamed the countryside, striking convoys and outposts before melting into the terrain. Velker could no longer ignore the shifting tides. On the bridge of the Voracious Dawn, he stared at a holographic map of Earth, now covered in red markers representing lost or contested zones. This is unacceptable, he snarled. How does a backwater species like this continue to defy us? Drith, who had grown increasingly wary of her superior's temper, chose her words carefully. Humans are unlike any species we've encountered. Their technology is crude, but their methods are unpredictable. They don't fight by our rules. Velker slammed his fist into the console. Then we changed the rules. Deploy the Titans. A ripple of shock passed through the bridge. The Titans were the Kellans' ultimate weapon, colossal war machines that had obliterated entire civilizations in previous campaigns. Admiral, Drith began hesitantly, deploying Titans on a world like this risks. Enough, Velker roared. I will not have our glorious dominion humiliated by vermin. Deploy them. Now. The first Titan deployment was in what had once been Sao Paulo. The towering war machine descended from the skies, its sheer size blocking out the sun. Standing over 200 meters tall, its bipedal frame bristled with plasma cannons and missile pods. A single Titan had been enough to subjugate entire planets in the past. The humans, however, did not run. As the Titan marched into the city, crushing skyscrapers underfoot, a squad of human engineers hidden in the rubble activated an EMP device cobbled together from salvaged Kellan parts. The Titan froze mid-step, its systems briefly scrambled. Before it could recover, the humans struck. A barrage of improvised explosives, drones and Maverick-mounted plasma cannons targeted the Titan's joints and vulnerable points. It took hours, but eventually the once invincible war machine collapsed in a heap of sparking debris. The victory sent shockwaves through both sides. For the humans, it was a symbol of hope. For the Kellans, it was the first time in centuries that a Titan had fallen. Velker stood in the observation deck of the Voracious Dawn, staring out at the battered planet below. His fists were clenched so tightly that his claws drew blood. This is no longer an invasion, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's a war of attrition. And the longer it drags on, the more dangerous these humans become. Drith approached cautiously. Admiral, we've received intelligence that the humans are working on something. A weapon. Something devastating. Velker's eyes burned with rage. Then we end this. No more games. Launch a full planetary purge. Drith hesitated, then spoke with uncharacteristic defiance. Admiral, if we do that, the Galactic Council? To hell with the Council. Velker snapped. If we let these humans live, they'll become a threat not just to us, but to the entire galaxy. Drith bowed her head, though the doubt in her eyes remained. As you command, Admiral. But as she left the deck, one thought lingered in her mind. What if we've already lost? Admiral Velker stood in the war room aboard the Voracious Dawn, staring at a tactical display that now painted a grim picture of the invasion. The map of Earth shimmered with Kellan occupation zones, but the human-controlled areas had grown like a virus, stubbornly holding ground in regions the Kellans thought crushed weeks ago. Worse still, there were no patterns, no predictable movements or targets. The humans fought as though they had no central command, yet their actions displayed uncanny coordination. Drith, Velker growled, his claws raking across the console. Where is the Purge fleet? If we do not reduce this planet to slag within the next cycle, we risk losing control entirely. Drith, standing rigid at his side, hesitated before answering. The Purge fleet will be in position within 30 rotations. However, she trailed off and Velker's glare fixed on her like a predator locking onto prey. However what? We've intercepted human communications, she said reluctantly. They've begun massing forces at key locations. Our intelligence suggests they may be preparing for a coordinated strike. Against us. On an orbital level. Velker let out a sharp bark of laughter, though there was no humor in it. Orbital? Their ships are inferior in every measurable way. Even if they throw every vessel they have at us, we'll swat them from the stars. Drith's gaze flickered downward. Admiral, I wouldn't underestimate them. They've salvaged more of our tech than we anticipated. Their ships may not be as crude as they once were. Velker's lip curled into a snarl. We will see about that. Dispatch interceptors to crush their fleet before they get anywhere near us. If they insist on climbing to the stars, let us ensure it's their tomb. On the surface of Earth, in the sprawling subterranean base beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Isaac Reed stood before a massive holotable surrounded by his advisors. The air in the room was tense, but there was an undercurrent of something more potent: resolve. What's the status on the Perseus protocol? Reed asked, his voice steady but firm. Dr. Mia Carter, the engineer who had delivered humanity's first real victories, leaned forward over the table. Her face was smudged with soot, her uniform tattered from weeks spent in makeshift workshops and battlefields. Yet her eyes gleamed with purpose. The weapon is nearly operational, she said. But there's a catch. Of course there is, Reed muttered. What kind of catch? It's experimental, Mia admitted. We've repurposed Kellen tech to power it, but that's the problem. Their tech isn't designed for sustained human use. If we push it too hard, we could lose control, or worse, it could fail entirely. Reed exhaled, the weight of the war pressing down on his shoulders. What's the alternative? Let the Kellens wipe us out? No, Mia said firmly. I'm just saying when we fire this thing, it's all or nothing. If it works, we cripple their fleet. If it doesn't, she didn't finish the thought. Reed nodded. Then we make sure it works. He turned to his officers. What's the status of our distraction fleet? A younger officer, Commander Liara Chin, stepped forward. The Vanguard fleet is ready. It's a patchwork of old Earth Defense Force ships and retrofitted Kellen vessels, but it'll do the job. The job being suicide, Mia muttered under her breath. Liara shot her a look but said nothing. They all knew the truth. The Vanguard fleet's mission was to draw the Kellen forces away from Earth's orbit long enough to fire the Perseus protocol. Survival wasn't part of the plan. Reed straightened. We've been pushed to the brink before, and we've always clawed our way back. This is no different. We win today or we die knowing we gave everything to stop them. The room was silent for a moment before Liara spoke. What happens if this works, sir? What's next? Reed's face hardened. If this works, we don't stop. We don't just survive. We show them what it means to declare war on humanity. The Vanguard fleet launched at dawn, a ragtag formation of human ships heading straight for the Kellen blockade in orbit. From the bridge of her retrofitted cruiser, the indomitable Liara Chen gripped the armrests of her chair. The ship hummed with barely contained energy from its salvaged Kellen reactor. All systems online, her helmsman reported. We're green across the board. Liara nodded, her expression unreadable. Begin the attack run. Let's give the Admiral something to worry about. The fleet surged forward, plasma fire streaking through the void. The Kellen interceptors responded immediately, their sleek, advanced ships cutting through the human formation like razors. But the humans fought back with a tenacity that defied all logic. Every loss was met with a counterattack, every defeat with a desperate victory. On the bridge of the voracious dawn, Velker watched the battle with a mix of amusement and disdain. Their desperation is pathetic, he sneered. They're throwing themselves at us like moths to a flame. Perhaps, Drith said cautiously. But something feels off. Why would they launch such a disorganized attack now when they know the Purge fleet is inbound? Velker waved her concerns away. It's their last gasp. Crush them and be done with it. Meanwhile, on the surface, Mia Carter stood in the control room of the Perseus protocol. The weapon was buried deep underground, a vast array of repurposed Kellen energy cores linked together into a single devastating beam cannon. The room buzzed with activity as engineers and technicians prepared for the firing sequence. How long until we're ready? Mia asked, her voice sharp. 10 minutes, maybe less, one of the technicians replied. But the energy buildup is unstable. If we fire too early, just make it work, Mia snapped. She glanced at a nearby monitor showing the carnage in orbit. The Vanguard fleet was holding, but barely. If they didn't fire soon, there'd be no one left to protect them. Reed's voice came over the comms. Mia, status report? We're almost there, she replied. How's it looking up there? Bad, Reed said grimly. Liara's fleet is taking heavy losses. If you've got a miracle up your sleeve, now's the time. Mia gritted her teeth and turned back to her team. Double-check the core stability. We're firing in 5. In orbit, the Indomitable was barely holding together. Liara shouted orders as her ship weaved through a hail of plasma fire, her crew scrambling to keep the engines from failing. They're focusing fire on us, her tactical officer yelled. Good, Liara said through gritted teeth. Let them. They think we're the threat. Keep them distracted. The Kellen fleet, drawn by the human ship's relentless assault, began to close in, diverting more and more resources to eliminate the attackers. And that was when the Perseus protocol fired. A blinding beam of energy erupted from Earth's surface, cutting through the atmosphere and into orbit with surgical precision. The voracious dawn shook violently as the beam carved through the Kellen fleet, disabling their shields and detonating several capital ships in a chain reaction of explosions. What is this? Velker roared as alarms blared across the bridge. Drith stared in stunned silence at the tactical display. They've weaponized our own technology against us. Velker's rage boiled over. Pull back. Regroup. I want that weapon destroyed. But even as his fleet attempted to retreat, the humans pressed the attack. The remaining vanguard ships surged forward, targeting the disoriented Kellen forces with renewed ferocity. On the surface, Mia collapsed into a chair as the control room erupted in cheers. The Perseus protocol had worked. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had struck a blow not just of survival but of dominance. And in the void above Earth, Admiral Velker realized too late, they hadn't just underestimated humanity. They had awakened a monster. Admiral Velker paced the bridge of the voracious dawn, his composure shattered. The once pristine flagship now showed scars of the battle, a testament to humanity's unexpected ferocity. Sections of the ship were venting atmosphere, vital systems flickered under stress, and crew members scrambled to keep the vessel operational. Admiral, Drith said quietly, her voice tight with controlled panic. We've lost over 60% of the fleet. Communications with the purged ships are down. Our forces are scattered and reinforcements are days away. Velker's claws raked across the armrest of his command chair. Days? We don't have days. That cursed weapon has tipped the scales. This species was supposed to submit. They were nothing. Drith hesitated before speaking again, her tone low. Admiral, perhaps it is time to consider retreat. If we withdraw now we can regroup and… retreat? Velker roared, his voice echoing across the bridge. You suggest we slink back to the Dominion with our tails between our legs, telling the Conclave we were bested by primates? No. We will not retreat. We finish this. He slammed a clawed fist on the console, pulling up a holographic map of Earth. His yellow eyes zeroed in on the origin point of the human weapon. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Target all remaining bombardment weapons on this location. I want it obliterated. Dritha's jaw tightened, but she gave the order. A handful of Kellen warships repositioned, their weapons powering up for a strike that would pierce through the planet's crust and destroy the Perseus protocol once and for all. But before the order could be carried out, alarms blared across the bridge. Admiral, a young Kellen officer shouted. Multiple human vessels approaching at high velocity. They're targeting us directly. Velker turned sharply to the tactical display. What remained of the human fleet, a ragtag collection of battered ships, was charging toward the voracious dawn. It was a suicidal move, but one carried out with terrifying precision. They're nothing more than gnats, Velker snarled. Destroy them. The Kellen fleet opened fire, plasma beams lancing through the void. Several human ships were torn apart instantly, their debris scattering like fireflies. Yet the others pressed forward, undeterred. And then, something unexpected happened. The lead human ship, the Indomitable, still limping from the earlier battle, fired its engines in a final burst of energy, closing the distance between itself and the voracious dawn. On board, Liera Chen stood resolute, her battered face lit by the glow of warning lights. This is for Earth, she whispered, her hand hovering over the detonation trigger. The Indomitable had been rigged with salvaged Kellen antimatter cores, primitive compared to their original design, but deadly nonetheless. As the ship rammed into the voracious dawn, the cores detonated in a blinding explosion that tore through the Kellen flagship. The bridge of the voracious dawn was chaos. Fires raged, conduits sparked, and Kellen officers screamed as the ship's systems failed one by one. Velker was thrown to the floor, blood streaming from a gash on his head. Damage report, he bellowed, struggling to his feet. Drith clung to her console, her usually calm demeanor replaced by fear. Catastrophic damage, Admiral. The core is destabilizing. We're going to lose the ship. Velker's vision swam, but his fury burned bright. Evacuate the crew. I will not die here. Drith hesitated, then nodded. Yes, Admiral. As escape pods began to launch from the failing flagship, Velker made his way to the bridge's escape craft. But before he could board, A human transmission crackled through the comms. "Admiral Velker," the voice said, calm and firm. It was General Isaac Reed. Velker froze, his claws tightening around the edge of the hatch. "You dare address me?" "Damn right I do," Reed replied. "You've underestimated us at every turn. You thought we'd bow. You thought you'd crush us. But this war isn't over, it's just beginning. You think this victory means anything?" Velker spat. "We are the Kellen Dominion. We will return, and when we do you will—" "You won't," Reed interrupted coldly. "Because humanity doesn't forget. And we don't forgive. You wanted war? You got it. But the next time you come, you'll find an enemy that knows your every weakness. You'll find a species that has grown stronger because of you." The transmission ended, leaving Velker seething. He climbed into the escape craft, his mind racing. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. On Earth, celebrations erupted as the remnants of the Kellen fleet retreated. Humanity had not just survived, they had won. The cost had been staggering, but the message was clear. Earth was not a world to conquer. Mia Carter stood outside the wreckage of the Perseus Protocol, her team already working on repairs. General Reed approached, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. "It worked," he said simply. "For now," Mia replied. "They'll be back. You know that, right?" Reed nodded. "And when they do, we'll be ready." Far from Earth, on the edge of Kellen space, Velker's escape craft docked with a Dominion cruiser. As he stepped aboard, battered but alive, his thoughts burned with one goal: vengeance. But deep in the recesses of his mind, another thought took root, a doubt he couldn't shake. Perhaps we chose the wrong species to conquer. And as humanity rebuilt, the stars whispered with a growing truth. Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a warning.